All right, then we can get started. My name is Anisha Patel, and on behalf of Law for Palestine, Al-Haq, and Human Rights Watch, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I want to start by mentioning that we have live interpretation in Arabic and English, and you can select the language of your choice by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of the screen. We also request that you post your questions in the chat as they come up, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. Today's conversation responds to the urgent call for ending the famine in Gaza. But before we get there, it is critical to acknowledge that the conversation of Palestine in no way is a humanitarian question alone. It has been 600 days since the start of the Israeli genocidal assault on the Palestinian people in Gaza. This is the most violent manifestation of the ongoing 77-year-long Nakba that has been inflicted on the entirety of the Palestinian people across the geography and in the diaspora. The apartheid, the genocide, the unlawful occupation, forced displacement, annexation are all different facets of the settler colonial regime imposed on the people. Stemming from this reality, the Palestinian civil society's demands for embargoes and sanctions on Israel have been very clear and are rooted in international legal frameworks. At this point, a complete embargo on the buying, selling, and transfer of arms and energy to Israel is the bare minimum if states do not want to be held complicit in breach of their international legal obligations. With that said, today's conversation focuses on the rapidly devolving situation on the ground, the famine in Gaza. It's Israel's almost complete blockade of all humanitarian aid and life-saving assistance to the Palestinian people in Gaza, which has gone on for almost 3 months now, a policy widely recognized as genocidal and, of course, in complete violation of the ICJ preliminary measures orders in the genocide case brought forward by South Africa and the ICJ's advisory opinion that has deemed Israel's presence in all of the occupied Palestinian territory unlawful. Words of condemnation for Israeli actions were not enough already 20 months ago. But now the lack of action by states in ending these daily atrocities and the absolute impunity that Israel has been granted is shredding international law and any credibility that it has as a tool for fighting injustice. Against this background, more than 1,000 Palestinian and international organizations from every corner of the world have issued an urgent and unified call to the international community to end this manufactured mass starvation in Gaza. The links for the call can be found in the chat. An initiative collectively led by the Palestinian civil society has called for the immediate organization and deployment of a diplomatic humanitarian convoy through the Rafah crossing. This call is rooted in the legal premise that states have a duty to take all measures in their capacity to prevent genocide. And this call urges states to join by sending official diplomatic missions to accompany the aid trucks already waiting at the crossing and to enter Gaza alongside them. We need states and individual members of government to come forward and join this call to participate in this convoy. And our panel of speakers today will reflect on this in their interventions, in their capacities as experts in their respective fields. Our first speaker for today is Dr. Marwan Alhams, the Director of Field Hospitals in Gaza. He will speak to the current health situation on the ground in terms of access to medical aid and hospital operations, especially in light of the acute malnutrition among the Gaza population. As mentioned earlier, we have 5 minutes for every intervention, and we have live interpretation. Dr. Marwan, over to you.
الله يجزيكم الخير على كل هذه الجهود اللي تقوم فيها، يعني وحياكم الله على ما تقوم به. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يعني سلام مني ومن كل أهالي غزة وفلسطين لكل من يقف معنا في هذه المحنة وفي هذه الحرب. يعني بداية نقول أنه بعد 600 يوم حرب وإبادة ومجازر وحرب تجويع مستمرة في قطاع غزة ولا تتوانى ولا تتوقف حتى ولو للحظة واحدة. المستشفيات كما يعني مكتظة به جرحى
the
وفقد
injured,
الذكر.
and the patients.
العنايات المركزة التي من خلالها بالمرضى وبالمصابين ولا يمكن إفراج والسرير
we
إلا
don't have any place
بوفاة أحد
for
المرضى أو
any
باستشهاد أحد الجرحى.
patient unless one of
وأصحاب الأمراض
them is
المزمنة
martyred
والأطفال والرضع
and
والنساء الحوامل
or
لا
dies.
تجد
The
ما
pregnant
تحتاج
woman
عليه حتى لو
don't
علبة
find
حليب
whatever they can
أو
eat,
حتى لو
even if it was
لقمة
just one
خبز أو حتى قطعة عليها ولا لطمة.
bottle of milk or
وسوء
one
التغذية التي
piece of bread.
اتسع كل الفئات
Malnutrition
العمرية
have
ولم تستثني أحد، حتى
reached
الشباب
everyone, did not
الآن في
exclude anyone,
قطاع
even the
غزة
youth
الفقر
in
الدامي،
Gaza. They have
يعني نسبته كبيرة
the
جدا،
high
يعني ذلك سوء
level of
التغذية ينال كل المراحل
malnutrition
العمرية.
and also blood
يعني
issues.
سأسرد بعض
I will give you
من
some examples of
الحقائق والأرقام
the
حتى
realities and the
نكون
numbers,
يعني لكل محامي العالم
so that all the
هذه
world
نقاط
lawyers
يجب
know
أن توصل لكل
about
العالم. هل تريد
this.
الترجمة
Do you
أم
want me to
أن
translate this,
أكمل؟
or do I continue?
You can continue.
Continue.
So even the
الآن وصل
intensive
عدد
care don't
الشهداء
have
في داخل
enough
قطاع غزة
beds.
إلى
The martyrs now,
45250 شهيد،
450,000
وهؤلاء
martyrs.
ليست أرقام، هؤلاء
45,
كل من لديه
sorry,
علم،
45,000.
كل من
They are
لديه
not
قصة،
numbers. They
كل من
have
لديه
stories. They
حكاية،
have
كل من لديه ما
lives.
يريد يسرده
Each one
في
of them
داخل قطاع
had
غزة.
something they
أما
can
عن
say.
الجرحى فحدث ولا
In regard
حرج،
to the wounded,
124,000 جريح ما بين
124,000 wounded.
بتر، ما بين
Some of them are
إجهاد، ما بين
amputated
إصابة جامدة،
injuries,
ما
eye
بين
injuries, permanent injuries,
أغلب هؤلاء
disabilities. All of
من
those have
الأطفال
been
والنساء
children and
بنسبة
women.
72 إلى 73%
72 to
من النساء والأطفال.
73% are
وعلى
women,
سبيل
children.
المثال
To give you an
عدد الشهداء
example,
من
the number
الأطفال
of the martyrs of the children is
16854 شهيد قتل، أي
16,854
ما يقارب
child martyred.
31% من هؤلاء
31%
الشهداء
of the
أطفال.
martyrs are children.
والذي أقل من عمر
The
العالم
ones who are less than 1 year
$931
are
عمرهم أقل
931
من الناس
child who
اللي
have been
استشهدوا في
martyred
داخل هذه الحرب.
under 1
أما
year.
من ولدوا
However, were born and
واستشهدوا في
martyred
داخل
inside
الحرب
this war or during
فهم
the war are
356 طفل،
356 child.
أي هذا
So
ولد
they have
في
been
داخل الحرب
born and
واستشهد في
martyred
خلال الحرب.
during the war.
ولدينا
We have
60 حالة
60
طفل
cases of children who
وفاة
died
بسبب
because of the
الحروب الأهلية.
malnutrition. In
أما بخصوص
regard to the
النساء
massacres and what the
والأطفال
occupation of Israel
المنزوية
have committed against the people of
الفلسطيني فهي
Palestine
على
are the
التالي:
following.
من
Massacres
ذلك
against
حق
the
العدد
families, 14,000
14,000
families have
تم
been
نزوح بحقهم
massacred. The
العدد
families which have been
الصحيح
smashed
بالكامل،
completely, the
عدد
number of
العائلات
families which
التي
have been
ماتت بالكامل
erased
ولم يتبقى
completely,
منها أحد
no survivors,
2483 حالة.
2,483 families.
وهذه
Those
فقط
have
من
been
سبيل
erased from
المدى.
the civil registrar.
العائلات
Full families, the
المتبقي
families who
فيها
have one
أي واحد،
survivor left,
وهو
either a
واحد
child
طفل،
or a
إما
woman
امرأة
or a
إما
one
رجل،
man, are
حققنا وفاة 22
5,620 families. So
يعني
can
هم
you imagine
تصوروا أنه 5220
5,620 families
فقط
only have one
وعدد لا
survivor
يتبقى إلا واحد من
of
هذه
those
العائلة.
families? And this,
وهذه
if you look
النسبة
at the
وهذه
numbers and
الإحصائيات
statistics, you
تقول
know
أنه
that
هناك لدينا
every
كل
15
15
minutes
دقيقة
there is a
شخص شهيد،
martyr. Every
وكل
40
40
minutes,
دقيقة
there is a
طفل
child who is
شهيد أو
martyred
خلاص
over those
بيتهم،
600 days.
وكل
Every
60
60 minutes,
دقيقة
a
امرأة
woman would
شهيدة.
have been martyred.
وهذا شيء
This is
يعني
a
رهيب، شيء
catastrophe. It's
مرعب، شيء
horrific
مخيف
to
أن يكون
have
لدينا
every
60
60
دقيقة
minutes a
امرأة
woman
تستشهد، كل
martyred,
40 دقيقة
every
طفل،
40
كل
child,
15
every
دقيقة
15
شخص في
a
قطاع
man
غزة.
in Gaza
إذا
Strip. If
استمرت
this
الحرب
war
لن
continues,
يبقى
no
أحد
one
في
is going
قطاع
to be
غزة.
left in
أما
Gaza Strip.
بخصوص
In
الوضع
regard to the
الصحي
health
وما آلت
situation,
إليه
and
المنظومة الصحية في
the
داخل
health
قطاع
system
غزة،
in Gaza, I'm
فأحدثكم
saying
أنه
now that
لدينا
we have
38 مستشفى كانت في داخل
38
قطاع غزة
hospitals
تعمل
which had
بكامل
full
قوتها،
capacity before.
دمرت 22 مستشفى
22 of them
كاملة
have been
كاملة.
destroyed fully, which
الآن
means
لم
that
يتبقى
nothing is
لدينا
left of those
إلا
22. We have
12
only
مستشفى
12
تعمل
left, and they are working
بالأدنى
with the bare
من
minimum,
الخدمة، بل
and they
أقل
provide
من
the
الحد الأدنى.
minimum of the services, even
بالرغم أنه
less than
الآن
that.
نحن
Now we
نعاني
are also
معاناة
suffering
شديدة
because of
بسبب
the
إصابة خلال 6 أشهر
besiegement
مستمر.
of 3 months.
47%
47%
من
of the
نسبة المخزون
storage of the
الزراعي
medicine
أصبحت
now is
رصيدها
almost
صفر.
zero. and 65% of the also consumables is going to continue. Everything in regard to the consumables is going to be zero, and 15% left of medicine. 30 center of primary health care have been are the ones left out of 105 healthcare centers. And those primary health centers have been also damaged, and they work with the bare minimum. In regard to the occupation of the beds inside Gaza Strip is over 106% of out of 100, because we don't have enough beds now, and because over 65% of the beds have been lost. Because of this war, they have been destroyed, they have been evacuated, and the last eviction was today. The occupation of Israel requested from Al-Auda hospital, all the people, 160 people, 160 spirits or souls have been requested to evacuate without any guarantees for a safe corridor or a path, and they don't have any guarantees given to protect their lives.
Dr. Marwan,
160 people.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you to conclude in a minute? Dr. Marwan, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you to conclude in a minute? Thank you.
Enough.
1 more minute. Thank you. Sorry.
حياكم الله.
ممكن نختم بعد دقيقة دكتور مروان؟
Yes, I'm trying to be quick.
Thank you.
What I'm saying is that in 1 minute, I will say 41% of the people who had the kidney failure have died because of the war. And now we have a loss in the diagnosis, the CT, the rest, we only have CT and MRI. Few have been left, have been destroyed. 49 generators are left out of 110 generators of electricity. We still have them in the health centers, and with the Ministry of Health, those hospitals should be provided with electricity from the grid. Nonetheless, the Israelis have cut the electricity of the grid, and we are left with the generators which have been destroyed. Now, what we want this war to be stopped. We want to have a full cessation of the aggressions. We want the hunger war to be stopped. We want all the aid, the medical, the clean water, the food items. We don't have any drinkable water left because the occupation have targeted all the water stations and wastewater management stations, as well as the desalination also stations. People now have pandemic spread around. Because of this, the Ministry of Health cannot stop those diseases which are now. We want this war to be stopped. The medical equipment as well as the medicine should be provided as well. We need doctors to be helping to be entering, and we need also mobile hospitals, so that in the north of Gaza Strip, because the occupation did not leave any center in those areas. At the end, I would like to thank you for all what you've been providing, and I hope that you continue in supporting the Palestinians.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marwan. I am sorry that we are 20 months later. We still have to listen to
take your time
to ask you to tell us this.
Thank you to support. Thank you for all stand with us.
Thank you.
شكرا لكم.
Our next speaker is Professor Michael Fakhri. Michael Fakhri is the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food and a professor in law teaching human rights. Professor Michael will speak to us on the ongoing starvation as a method of war and what can be expected from states in light of his work as the Special Rapporteur. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anisha. خليني بلش بس لأشكرك يا دكتور مروان. الله يعطيك ألف عافية والله يحميكم يعني بغزة. أنا من هلأ رح كفي بالإنجليزي. We're at the most horrific and vicious phase of Israel's starvation campaign. And what I'll do is I'll put this moment the last 80 days, 85 days in context. Then I'll talk about some of the legal obligations and talk about the diplomatic convoy. Israel began its hunger campaign against Gaza 25 years ago. This is a 25-year blockade. It started in 2000. It became more acute in 2007, 2005 to 2007. And then on October 9th, 2023, Israel announced its starvation campaign, which we're seeing now. And for those first 2 weeks of this war, Israel imposed a blockade. And from the beginning, it's been clear that Israel is using starvation in the last 19 months as a mechanism to displace people from the north, concentrate Palestinians into southern Gaza, and execute as much pain, horror, and anguish as possible to try and weaken the Palestinian people, to try to push the Palestinian people out of Gaza. And as they have recently announced, in an attempt to indefinitely occupy and, in effect, annex Gaza, but also the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Because let us recall, in September 2023, Prime Minister Netanyahu stood up before the General Assembly and held up a map of so-called Israel, which showed full annexation of the remaining Palestinian territories. So none of this is a surprise. The international community has had notice for years of Israel's intent. And Israel, if anything, has always explained what it's doing and then executed what it's doing, regardless of its international legal obligations. So let me describe then what we've seen in the last 80 days. On March 1st, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced a full blockade against the Palestinian people of Gaza, denying all food, medicine, water, and aid to enter into Gaza. And that's in effect what Israel did. Netanyahu announced his intent and executed this plan while there's an outstanding warrant for his arrest and for the arrest of former Minister of Defense Gallant from the International Criminal Court. And one of the charges is the war crime of starvation. In this context, starvation is not just a war crime in which we can charge individuals. This is in the context, of course, of a genocide, which means the state of Israel is liable. So starvation is being used in this context as a genocidal tool to attempt to eliminate the Palestinian people as part of this illegal occupation and attempt at annexation. Now what we're seeing is a new phase of the starvation campaign in which a trickle of aid is being brought in by Israel through what is being called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And this is in partnership with the United States government. This foundation is a private foundation that was incorporated in Switzerland, and it's implementing a plan that was created by the Israeli government. Israel announced this plan in April, and immediately the Secretary General in April denounced this plan as contravening humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality. And Israel and the United States admitted that they were using humanitarian aid and the withholding of humanitarian aid and food and starvation as a negotiating tactic, as a bargaining chip. This was by Ambassador Mike Huckabee from the United States, and by Israel saying, if certain political conditions are met, we will allow food in. So they admitted to war crimes. They admitted to using starvation as genocide unabashedly. So it doesn't matter whether we say genocide, war crime, crime against humanity, gross violations of human rights, we're past that. We're now at the phase to ask what is to be done. And that is why we're here today. First and foremost, all states have been on notice, like I said, for years, in the least for at least 19 months, of genocide, of starvation. So they have a duty to end the genocide, a duty to end starvation, and of course, a duty to end the illegal occupation, as we recently saw from the International Court of Justice. What's important about the decision for the International Court of Justice is not just that it said the occupation is illegal. We all knew that, but it's the remedy. It demanded that Israel withdraw and end its illegal occupation as soon as possible. And it demanded Israel pay reparations, meaning it framed the issue as a matter of justice and as a matter of human rights. That's what's at stake, meaning what's at stake is the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and their right of return. This is ultimately what we're always talking about, as highlighted by the International Court of Justice. So now, as many of us know now and have heard, over 800 organizations have called for a diplomatic convoy, meaning the United Nations and other humanitarian organizations are ready to enter into Gaza. They have the trucks ready, they have the logistics, they have the networks, they have the wherewithal. This Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and this trickle of aid is a military tactic to corral people into concentrated areas and basically continue punishing them. UNICEF called the Israeli plan not a humanitarian plan, but they said this is a way of using people and aid as bait. UNICEF rarely uses such strong language. So what we need is actual humanitarian aid to enter. So Israel is denying the entrance of this aid as a violation of international law. And therefore, what needs to happen is to break through the blockade and to provide the legal and political and diplomatic support. This is where this call for a diplomatic envoy is coming from. I'll add that recently the Freedom Flotilla had attempted, this is a group of civilians, had attempted to basically self-enforce international law and deliver humanitarian aid into Gaza. But they were bombed off the coast of Malta by a drone. And even as we speak, they're preparing yet again to deliver aid. So there are attempts by civilians as well. So if civilians are willing to put their life on the line, it's a bare minimum to ask for a diplomatic convoy to actually enforce international law. I also know parliamentarians in Ireland are pressuring the government to pass a General Assembly resolution to call for peacekeepers to accompany these humanitarian convoys. So basically, this is a call to enter, to deliver humanitarian aid into Gaza by any means necessary, through the support of civilians, through the support of diplomats and parliamentarians, through any support that we can gather. And with that, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for that, Michael. I think setting the context for what is required and what is bare minimum is really, really critical right now. Thanks for that. Our next speaker today is Lynn Boylan, a member of the European Parliament and chair of the Delegation for Relations with Palestine. MEP Lynn will focus on the EU's position regarding the use of starvation as a weapon by Israel and what is expected from EU governments individually and collectively. Lynn, the floor is yours.
Apologies, sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button, and just want to say solidarity to Dr. Marwan. And I'll be brief just because I know we're under pressure for time, but to thank the organisers for the invitation to speak tonight, and apologies that I have to leave early. Just I think everybody is scrambling at the moment because the situation is so dire, and there's many events happening in Dublin, and I'm sure it's the same in lots of other countries. I think what is very clear, as others have said, is that not only is Israel using starvation as a tool of control, and they have done this for years. We know that in monitoring and controlling the calorific content going into the Gaza Strip, but they're actually using it to try to ethnically cleanse the people of Gaza off the land. But it's also very, very clear that part of this agenda is to try to dismantle international law. It's to try to dismantle the system of humanitarian aid that exists, and it's to try to end the legitimacy of UNRWA and its presence in the region. And that is very clear that is the agenda of the Israeli government. I think we will, in years to come, we will look at how the EU has allowed Israel to use whatever influence they have to facilitate EU member states and the European Union to effectively allow this to happen and to, in some senses, endorse it, with the actions that they've taken, and that they're now calling into question the entire international law and the future of multilateralism because they haven't held Israel to account, because they haven't taken any actions to date. In regards to what needs to happen now, I mean, on the broader issue outside of starvation, it's very clear, and I'm sure my colleague Mark will go into more detail on this, but like, we are always calling for the suspension of the EU-Israel Association Agreement, not just a review. We need it suspended. We need an arms embargo to stop the flow of weapons into Israel. In Ireland, we've heard about the call for a UN General Assembly resolution to allow peacekeepers to go in. We've also had a bill last night blocked by the Irish government to end the sale of Israeli war bonds by the Irish Central Bank. And we have the state trying to water down an occupied territories bill, which would give effect to the ICJ ruling of July 2024. So what I would like to see is not just the European Union to join this diplomatic convoy and to ensure that the aid gets in. If they genuinely want to see an end of this genocide, then that's what's required. But in the absence of EU consensus, because we can see that the blocks are there within the EU, then I would be calling on, and I have done, every member state is legally and morally obliged to act now. And certainly I will be taking it to the Irish government that they need to support this diplomatic convoy by all means necessary. I mean, we have seen in the recent days, EU diplomats being shot at by the IDF. So it seems at no point is there a red line at which member states are going to stand up. So I think the bare minimum that they could be doing is to join the diplomatic convoy and to give it that support and cover that it so desperately needs to get that aid into Gaza. But also the EU and member states can't give any credence to this alternative humanitarian aid system that's being put out there, which involves American mercenaries, which involves the picking and choosing of who's deserving of aid, using facial recognition, using the horrific images we've seen of people sort of being caged in to access aid. We need to hear that absolutely and utterly condemned. And it is regrettable that the Commissioner Kaya Kallas almost gave some level of legitimacy to that initially when she said she would work with Israel to find an alternative source of humanitarian aid. So what we need to see now is the EU to, I suppose, put action to the mealy-mouthed words that we've heard, which is support the diplomatic convoy, end the trade with Israel, introduce sanctions, end the arms supply, and absolutely and categorically refuse to accept this alternative form of humanitarian aid, which not just has dire consequences for the people of Palestine and Gaza, but also will have long-term consequences on the future delivery of aid for any other rogue state that then chooses to do likewise. So I will leave it there. And I would again just like to say to Dr. Marwan, full solidarity, please stay safe, and our hearts go out to you in Gaza.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I think sanctions, arms, and support to the diplomatic convoy is definitely the bare minimum after all of this. So thank you for your support on that. Our next speaker this evening is Dr. Ralph Weil. Ralph Weil is a faculty member at the University College London and has appeared before the ICJ in the context of cases around Palestine. Ralph will discuss the obligations of third states under international law amid the ongoing genocide and starvation, and the consequences incumbent on states in light of this transgression, including their role in the proposed diplomatic convoy. Ralph, all yours.
Thank you. It's a great honor and privilege to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am speaking here in a private, personal, individual capacity, not on behalf of any state, international organization, NGO, or indeed my university. In its advisory opinion of 2024, the ICJ affirmed a profound shift of approach to the situation in the OPT compared to that taken by many states. It ruled that the Israeli presence is illegal in not only its conduct, but also its very existence. It's a violation of the legal right of self-determination of the Palestinian people and the legal prohibition of annexation through the use of force. As a result, it must end as rapidly as possible. A necessary implication of the court's finding that Israel's very presence is illegal is that Israel lacks any entitlement to do anything in the OPT on whatever basis. In consequence, everything it does there is illegal, not just those actions which involve the abusive and genocidal treatment of the Palestinian people, which are, of course, also illegal. What this also means is that Israel has no legal entitlement whatsoever to decide who can enter and be present in the OPT, nor restrict what those who are present can do. The fundamental character of the legal rules violated by Israel in maintaining its illegal presence means that all states bear special legal obligations to suppress these violations, special obligations they do not bear in other circumstances. These are entirely separate from and more extensive than the duties they have also to suppress the violations of international law involved in Israel's abusive, genocidal treatment of the Palestinian people. They are also much more fundamental and wide-ranging, since they concern the very presence in the OPT in and of itself. So every aspect of it, including but not limited to its genocidal conduct. States are legally required to, first, take positive steps to bring the presence to an end. Second, not to recognize the presence as lawful or legitimate more generally. Third, not to aid or assist it. The links between the illegal presence in the OPT on the one hand, and so-called Israel proper, 48, Palestine, on the other, in terms of the economy, society, military, natural resources, culture, education, etc., are multifaceted and inextricable. Consequently, implementing the suppression obligations I've mentioned requires states to address Israel as a general matter. It's impossible to disaggregate relations with the Israeli state and Israeli public and private actors to somehow identify discrete matters where recognition and/or aid and assistance will not end up one way or another linked to the illegal presence in the OPT. A complete general embargo of Israel is therefore legally required. So with arms, for example, there is an obligation not to provide any support to Israel whatsoever, not just support that might end up being used to commit genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity, since any support given is going to end up supporting the conduct of the occupation one way or another. However, there's still a seeming widespread denial about, or at least refusal to acknowledge, these fundamental legal issues, both the existential illegality of the occupation and what this means for the behavior of all states and the organizations they're members of. Even the current focus on genocide, which is of course necessary, by itself obscures the fact that even if Israel were not committing genocide, even if it were behaving entirely humanely towards the Palestinian people, its presence would still be a breach of the fundamental legal obligations, and states would still bear these fundamental obligations to bring the breaches to an end. The time is long overdue for all states to face up to the exceptional character of Israel's violations of fundamental legal obligations in maintaining its presence, and the exceptional consequential duty they have to suppress this, and legal right they have to complain about it. Legally, they are not disinterested bystanders, free to pick and choose whether and to what extent they address the illegality of Israel's presence. They are required to act, and in doing so must be comprehensive. Now, finally, as Israel has no right to decide who can enter and be present in the OPT, and states have a duty to take positive action to bring the violations of international law to an end, states should seek the permission of the representatives of the Palestinian people to send a protective presence into the OPT, including but not limited to the Gaza Strip, and to escort the entry by UNRWA and other UN agencies to provide urgent relief. So-called humanitarian intervention is intervention in a state against the wishes of the government of that state. This would not be that. Israel is not sovereign in the OPT, and its wishes are of no legal significance. International law is clear. States can and must act. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph, so much. I think the clarity of this is not up to Israel to decide who gets in and what gets into any parts of the OPT is something that we have to keep reiterating, because that's critical for states to not stop acting because of that, because otherwise we will never get forward. Our next speaker today is Adnan Abu Hasna, a media advisor at UNRWA. He will provide operational updates from the ground in regards to the availability of and access to humanitarian aid in Gaza and the current challenges facing UN agencies regarding aid delivery. The floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I would speak in Arabic if it's possible.
Please, you're welcome to.
But not to make any mistake, they are following us, for any terminologies and
Understand.
So okay. يعني أنا أعتقد بأن الواقع الآن في قطاع غزة في ظل نفاذ المواد الغذائية التي
have ended. The UNRWA is providing. Actually, UNRWA is the main provider of the aid in Gaza Strip. That it's difficult to move inside the also Strip. Actually, Israel, security-wise and operationally-wise, is in control of all the borders of Gaza Strip. When you move in this area, you should coordinate with the Israeli army, which is boycotting us now. As an UNRWA, they have boycotted us, and the coordination is done usually through the Office of the Humanitarian Issues Affairs, which is also part of the UN. However, together as a cluster, we have a cluster. We are a beehive. We work together, and we communicate with the Israeli side through this cluster. In regard to the UNRWA, we see things as follows. The UNRWA has in Gaza 13,000 employees. We have hundreds of NGOs. We have logistic capabilities. We can and execute the operations, and we have this since 1950. The UNRWA since then have been conducting all those operations of aid as well, education and health. Nonetheless, what happened lately was, especially after the 7th of October, was that now there is this new image or visage by the Israelis that they should destroy the backbone of the humanitarian aid which is provided to Gaza Strip, which is the UNRWA. This is clear for us. This is the Israeli vision. They want to destroy, to dismantle UNRWA. Why? Because the UNRWA, as the Prime Minister says, it's not me. He said, whenever if we end this organization, this means that the refugees issues is going to be ending. ended. And this means that we have destroyed every kind of pillars for the next solution, which is the two-state solution. This means that Israel have a new slogan, which is they need to end UNRWA, because they think that if you end UNRWA, you will end the issue of the refugees. And Israel have forgotten that all the decisions related to the refugees, like 184, 194, all of them have been issued before the establishment of UNRWA, not after that. So the reality on the ground is currently, especially after the 2nd of March, is that the UN, especially the UNRWA, have thousands of employees. We have all the capacity necessary, logistically speaking. We have the expertise and we have the data as well. The data is something we have. However, there is this decision by the Israelis that let's replace all of this system in addition to the non-governmental organizations, which my colleague Amjad represents, that they were thinking about replacing this huge system with the Gaza Foundation. Some men of security, some people who we don't know their mandate and how this organization have been created, and this is SRS, where you have tens of people who want to erase the whole system of UNRWA, not after the 7th of October, but even before 7th of October. We have been working for tens of years. Actually, it's a very grave situation. And if this is going to continue, what's happening is going to continue. And they forbade this UN agency from working in the way it should, is not going to lead to just the starvation or the famine in Gaza Strip. Daily, it's proven. Today, another chaotic incident happened in the distribution points in Gaza by this institution itself, this new organization. We have experience, long experience. We have thousands of employees. However, we also face difficulties in dealing with people because Gaza, everyone there is hopeless. Everyone is full with anger, and that's why dealing with them needs a lot of experience and patience. And you need to have a specific modality. You need to have a culture. And you need to know the culture of people, how to deal with them. You don't get trucks of food and then you just throw them to the people in a square. So whomever wants to take some aid, they will take that randomly. No, we are now at a cross point. It's very important either to go back to work as an organization, or this form or new model in Gaza. Everyone is doubtful about what they have as Lazzarini had said. He said, I'm astonished that there is a humanitarian aid organization which accepts to be a cover and an umbrella for an agenda which is a military and a political agenda. How could any really humanitarian organization have such a stance? So the UN's position is decisive. I don't want to be long. Nonetheless, there is another important topic, which is this organization, which is working now in southern Gaza in this way, which the whole world have witnessed. The question is this going to be repeated in education, in health, in Gaza Strip? UNRWA has students in our schools. Are they going to do this as well there? Are they going to establish another new organization for education? Another one for health, etc.? What is happening at this moment in Gaza is now, first of all, the situation is is deteriorating in every sector. This tendency to erase the UN as an organization and the rest of the organizations, my colleague Amjad will talk about the other NGOs, this would mean that simply they are undermining the pillars of the humanitarian organization. They are undermining the pillars of the work of our organizations. And UNRWA, for example, has been providing the services like government. So this is the only body which this is the only body which is still solid and could survive in Gaza. If you destroy it, this means that you are destroying so many other things at the same time.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I have a few questions to follow up with you on, but I will save them for the question sections later. Thank you so much. Our next speaker today is Amjad Shawad, the director of Pingo, the Palestinian NGO network, and he will speak about the significance in the proposed diplomatic humanitarian convoy in light of the unfolding situation on the ground in Gaza. Amjad.
Thank you, and hi everyone. Just 5 minutes ago, there was an airstrike just in 300 meters of my office here. There's so many bodies in the street now. Part of them are children, starved children, malnutrition children. I closed the computer and I went out to see. This is the second one in my neighborhood here. The first one, there was 11 people were killed. And part of them, the escorting teams for the food convoy to Gaza. So there was intentional attacks by Israel towards the escorting teams to create the chaos. And what happened today also, and yesterday and the day before, by this Gaza Humiliation Foundation, obvious. It's intentional to create such things, to get the people for 2.5 hours by walk to this military basement, fenced one, with these militant guards, to receive this simple food parcel in order to show that they are delivering aid to the Gazans. Maybe Adnan forgot to mention that we have the list and we have these logistics, we have the staff, we have the principles. Yes, food is important for us. All of us are starving. Whatever you have, there is nothing to buy and nothing to get from the INGOs, the UN, or from the national NGOs. You cannot imagine how many calls that daily I'm receiving, asking about flour, bread, some rice, and some kind of assistance. Yes, we need food, but we need the protection. This convoy is very important to get the attention towards what's going on, to get the attention towards the 130,000 tons of aid supplies waiting in the crossings. Part of it expired, damaged. And Israel want to show that they are entering aid. This is not aid. It's kind of insulting of the Palestinians. We as humanitarian organizations, we are delivering dignified aid, dignified response to the needs of the people. Our children cannot imagine what is the meaning of trauma for these children. My son was in the street when it was strike. I could hear his voice from here. This diplomatic convoy, I hope that there will be more engagement from all actors to come. And we will wait for you here in Gaza with open hearts. For 600 days, the international community failed us, failed our children. They closed their ears and eyes towards what's going on in Gaza. We started to ask what's the meaning of these things that we used to convince ourselves about human rights, international law, international humanitarian law all the time. These conventions, when it was paralyzed to protect the hospitals, the patients, the children, the women, the elders. But it is the only thing that we have. We'll keep calling for justice, for human rights, for everything that can stop this genocide. Israel destroyed the socio-economic infrastructure in Gaza to make us totally dependent on humanitarian aid. While I'm talking with you, in Rafah, in the east part of Gaza, in the north, they continue destroying everything, make the building sad, to make Gaza an unlivable place for ages. Now we are living in 19% of the Gaza distance. My message, I know I talk, if you give me the floor, I would talk hours and hours. I'm in Gaza. So I'm sorry to talk with some emotions because this happened twice. I know how much it's difficult for the families who lost their beloved ones. Each family lost enough of its members. So my call, how much we can do more and more for the issue protection. And not just to talk about famine as its word in the dictionary and in our statements. It's suffering, suffocation, it's insulting, it's pains. Famine, it's protection. And if you are a cancer patient and you are malnutrition, I know so many. We used to deliver some meals to the hospitals. Now we cannot. Now there are so many injured people in the hospitals and they cannot receive meals. No milk powder for the children while the mothers can't breastfeed them. A lot of stories. Maybe we need ages to tell, but we have to do our best to stop this genocide, these attacks, this daily killing of tens of our civilians, our beloved ones, our families. As Dr. Morwan mentioned, the numbers, we are not only numbers, we are lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amjad, and we hope and pray for your safety, but we also promise to continue doing everything we can from where we are. We should not have to do this 600 days, or as Michael pointed out, several decades later. Our final speaker for today is Mark Botenga, a member of the European Parliament and Committee on Foreign Affairs, who will articulate the EU's position and expectations from EU governments in light of the current situation. Mark.
Thank you, and thank you to all speakers so far for your very strong testimonies and analysis. I'm not going to articulate the EU position because I personally consider it completely impossible to defend it. I think the EU position has been shameful. Lynn Boylan already said something about it, and I think The first thing, I mean, I know we're talking law, but I think the first thing here is as previous speakers have pointed out, it's very clear what is going on. The word genocide is being used by the International Court of Justice. The war crime of starvation has been mentioned also explicitly by the International Court, the International Criminal Court. So I think it is important, and I'll come back maybe to the legal point later. But first of all, that this is a political choice. So not to act is a political choice. In previous moments, I'm thinking about Kosovo in the 90s. I'm thinking about Libya 2011, so about 14, 15 years ago. That was a political decision, almost aside from all of these debates on is it a genocide, is it not a genocide, and so on, to intervene very, very strongly. And perhaps at the time, the choices that were made were, at least in the Libyan case, very, very disputable. But just to make it very clear that this is a political decision, there's also a political decision to pretend you don't know or you're not sure what's going on. Because, in my opinion, most European policymakers are very well aware of what is going on. I think you can see that also with Josep Borrell, who had a different language while he was still in office as High Representative, Minister of Foreign Affairs to an extent of the European Union, and the text he's writing now, he's publishing now. So I'm not at all on the line of saying they don't know. I think they know. I think they see, they have the reports, they have the intelligence reports, they have the media reports that we all see. They have the UN info and so on. So they know, and there's a political choice for the moment not to act. Now, this political choice, of course, has legal implications. There a number of things have been quoted already. I'm also, I'd like to refer to the responsibility to protect, which many Western countries have pushed for to be recognized by the United Nations, which was eventually recognized by the United Nations in 2005, and includes three pillars, one of them being the necessity or the possibility to collectively intervene. There's also, I mean, this interpretation of the ICJ of the judgment actually on the time on the application of the Genocide Convention in regard to Bosnia-Herzegovina, which was 2007, I think, which very clearly states that responsibility of states, of third states, is clear once they fail to take all measures to prevent genocide. And one of the criterion that is quoted at the time by the ICJ is the capacity to effectively influence the action of the persons likely to commit or committing or in the process of committing genocide. And they say, well, this capacity can be evaluated, can be assessed through different ways. But one of them is obviously the strength of political links and other links between the state in question or the actor in question and the main actors or states in the events committing genocide or likely to commit genocide. And now it is very clear that here the European Union and European countries as a whole have a very specific responsibility, because given the privileged relationship they have with Israel, and this is, I think it's important to highlight in this framework, European Union and European countries do not have normal relations with Israel. They have a privileged relationship with Israel, both politically, economically, trade-wise. The association agreement between Israel and the European Union gives Israel a number of privileges, both in market access, and hence gives also public funds to Israel and so on, but also gives huge influence or potentially huge influence of European countries to affect what is going on, and hence these responsibilities have been very clearly put out there and stated by the different international courts and experts. So the capacity of Europe to influence this, I'm not even speaking about the United States, is massive, and hence the responsibility of Europe is also both legally but obviously also politically massive. Now, the strategy we have seen inside Europe and inside particularly the European Union has been the opposite. rather than say, we want to deal with this in one way or the other. It's been, well, we're giving some humanitarian aid. We're the main donor of money to the Palestinians. So let's look the other way. This is what we're doing. And hence, this support for Israel has continued in very different forms and shapes. And at the same time, there's been attempts inside Europe to completely minimize or completely hide the question. And very opposite to what's been going on for Ukraine. For Ukraine, debates, support has been articulated, has been put not just front page of the media, but also, for example, in the European Parliament. I don't think I think there's been in the last years at least one debate or one resolution per month. On average, by the European Parliament, while for Gaza, for Palestine, this has been very, very different. So there's been this attempt as well to hide it on the one hand, and on the other hand, to criminalize actually the movement. And I think that's a big part of what we're seeing right now in Europe. There's a big disconnect between the leadership, the establishment, and the vast majority of people in most countries. And I think that is really important. And you've seen a criminalization of those people as well. People working in the institutions that are allegedly threatened to lose their job or to be replaced. Football players that have been punished, journalists that have been punished, people being repressed when they show up in the streets. Now, this is clearly not working. The movement of solidarity with Palestine has been increasing. And it's one of the factors, I think, that kind of explains a slight, and I'm not at all celebrating it as a massive victory, but there's been a slight change in rhetoric by some establishment politicians. They have not acted, let's be clear. There's not been any action, so that's absolutely shameful. But they do feel pressure, and I think they feel pressure at two levels. They feel pressure from countries in the global south. This is very clear. They've said this, that many countries in the global south have lost any confidence or trust, or the EU has lost any credibility when speaking about international law, human rights, and so on, as it continues to support the genocide of Palestinians, which is weakening the European stance in the world. So the establishment is worried about that. And secondly, there's the popular pressure from below, inside Europe, which has, of course, which is influencing them. You can see the attacks on the Freedom Flotilla that have been there, that are there, because these movements, the solidarity movements, scares them. And this is, I think, a signal of hope. If I'm really limiting myself to what's happening in Europe, just to not be too long and leave the time you want for the debate and the Q&A. And in this sense, I think the diplomatic convoy is really crucial. And it will be very good if there's a lot of people that can participate in it, because it also shows this disconnect, and it increases the pressure on those that are today complicit in genocide. Not only, of course, on the Israelis, but on those that are currently funding, facilitating, arming the genocide, and that have been doing so not just for the last 1.5 years, but for arguably decades. So that's why I think it's very crucial. I'm going to leave it here, so I'm not too long, I hope. But thanks again for the invitation and the very interesting panel. I'm, of course, available if there's questions or anything. Thank you.
Thank you. As you've rightly articulated, the EU has massive influence and hence a great responsibility to change the situation. And the lacking factor is political will. And I think this kind of takes us into the Q&A session, where one of the questions is about what can people do to support the diplomatic convoy. And I think this speaks to one of the two factors that you've mentioned, that people need to create incentives where the political elites are persuaded, pushed, feel obliged to do what they're morally and legally obliged to do anyway. That is to break the siege, to call for a ceasefire, to call for sanctions and embargoes. So for people to pressure their members of parliament, their representatives, to do what is legally their obligation to be done anyway, is kind of one of the things that can be done to take this forward. In terms of the question and answers and kind of building a little bit also on what you have previously said, and I'm going to kind of open this question to all the speakers, whoever wishes to kind of take this up. The other aspect that you mentioned, which was the pressure from the global South countries, and we've seen this extensively, where we've kind of looked at the global South trying to reclaim the space that belongs to it in the international legal sphere, in the international world order in general. Given this background, I'm going to plug in a question from the audiences, and again, all the speakers who are on the call, Michael, Ralph, Adnan, Amjad, anybody who is willing to pick it up. So in the conversation of the convoy, what is the role of Egypt and the Palestinian Authority in relation to this? Egypt has made it clear and is widely understood that the Israeli occupation is responsible for closing the Rafah crossing. However, Netanyahu has publicly claimed that Egypt is the one keeping it closed. In this context, are there any legal responsibilities or potential legal consequences that Egypt should consider in terms of facilitating the convoy? And what role does the Palestinian Authority and other states play in this effort? Ralph, Michael. I'm looking at the legal experts.
I'll just maybe quickly echo what Ralph already said. I mean, ultimately, the ultimate obligation lies with Israel as the illegal occupying force. I mean, that's where all things turn to. And Rafah is one of several crossings. There's two others. So without knowing the exact specifics, who's blocking what, etc., like these are facts that I don't have on hand. But as a matter of legal obligation, ultimately, Israel is responsible, whether it's through Rafah, whether it's through the other two or several crossings, whether it's by sea. There's so many ways to point their finger at Egypt is to avoid the bigger question.
Thank you. Ralph?
So, not to avoid the question, but obviously the issue is partly restrictions imposed from within the Gaza Strip, right? So, irrespective of what Egypt does, the question is being then able to access the Palestinian people, assuming entry throughout the Strip, right? And at the moment, that's not possible, is it? So at all. And indeed, it would be extremely dangerous to do so. And there is no legal basis for that at all. So and unlike, sorry about the noise, unlike the question of genocide and war crimes and crimes against humanity, where, of course, the waters can be muddied and there can be arguments about facts, and there has been no decision by a court, all of the excuses that are given for being able to somehow avoid addressing those issues. And I'm not justifying those evasion tactics, right? Obviously, the same states had no problem addressing issues of illegality in relation to other situations, for example, Russia and Ukraine, despite the fact that there has been no adjudication of the legality of that action. But I mean, to call that bluff, right? We do have the authoritative determination of the ICJ from last year very clearly and unequivocally. And the support for that determination by the General Assembly. And of course, not just in the question of the illegality of the authority and the illegitimacy of any action taken by Israel to restrict entry and presence and activities, but also, as I mentioned, this special duty that states bear to take positive action. And again, that was expressly articulated by the court very clearly and affirmed by the General Assembly. And moreover, there has been no significant dispute about the correctness of any of those decisions. So there is a gulf between the position that has been clarified legally and the responses of states. And practical action could involve foregrounding that determination to those who say, well, it's disputed about what's happening and the facts are disputed and we haven't had a court deciding things. Setting aside the correctness of that response, we do have a very clear, it is a fact that Israel controls the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and nobody disputes that. And that it is the very exercise of authority itself that is illegal, quite apart from its abusive conduct. So those arguments could be deployed more effectively to cut through in terms of the responses that are given for not taking action.
Thanks a lot. Another question that has come up, and maybe this is again is both legal and political. What are the concrete and feasible actions that countries in the global south can take to put more legal and political pressure on countries, it says European countries, but let's say countries in the global north, and other allies of Israel to change their attitude towards the actions that are happening? So I think the question speaks to what is it that countries can do concretely beyond condemnation, reviewing, suspend. What are the concrete actions that countries in the global south can kind of leverage and lobby? And I know that Professor Michael also is a scholar of third world approaches to international law. So there is some historical grounding that we can look to in how this has been done before in other contexts, in the context of apartheid South Africa. What is the kind of action that we should have already seen years ago, but now 600 days later, what is it that we can hope for, push for, fight for?
Yeah, thank you, Anisha. I try to stay quiet, but you brought me in. So we heard from all the speakers in Gaza and in Palestine. What else can be said? We've said everything. We said everything 20 months ago. Sanctions, we said it in October 2023. Unseat Israel from the General Assembly. Send in peacekeepers to support the humanitarian convoy. Send in a diplomatic envoy to support the humanitarian convoy. Prevent genocide, then we said stop genocide. Prevent starvation, stop starvation. وبعدين خلاص I've yelled at the General Assembly, I've yelled at the Human Rights Council, I've been kind and polite to the Security Council. And no, it's so clear. All the politicians, they mobilize and they keep talking as if they want to say something. We will recognize this and we will threaten that. And all the lawyers, you don't have to be a clever lawyer. All the lawyers, we've laid out all the options for so many times. We have the International Court of Justice. We have the International Criminal Court issuing warrants in new ways. We have all the legal tools and all the legal power. So what does law tell us? It allows us to point to political inaction, which other speakers have mentioned. So by laying out the legal framework, it highlights what is possible, it highlights what is necessary, and it highlights what is not being done. So the challenge now is no longer legal, it's how to translate all of these legal victories. These are legal victories. These are significant. These are significant legal victories. How to translate the legal victories into political and social victories to support the Palestinian people's human rights.
Thanks, Michael. I was not meaning to put you in a spot over there, but thank you. Amjad, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Michael, it's not the issue of the Palestinians. The issue to be in solidarity with themselves. If what's going on in Gaza will pass, I think it could happen in other contexts, in their context itself. So the international law, it's not for the Palestinians only. Human rights, it's not designed for us. So the issue that we are part of this humanity. And time is valuable here. Time costs lives. We had a lot of concerns, a lot of condemnation, as you said. But what Israel did, more and more massacres, more and more killing, suffocation. If this mechanism, military mechanism to distribute aid, will pass in Gaza, be sure that will be in other crises will be applied. It's not only for Gaza. This American-Israeli weaponization of aid will be reflected in other contexts. The experiment, as usual, start from here. So, first, I think in each country, the people knows well how to advocate, how to influence, how to pressure, and they can. And not the meaning that in the next week we'll have some aid convoys to enter, things is over. No. It's the beginning. And I have to say, this convoy to continue its arrangements to come and not to get in this dilemma. The Palestinian Authority, the Egyptian, the Israeli. Gaza is occupied physically, legally by Israel. So it's Israel. And not to have these political confusions about what's responsibility is clear. No need for interpretation for any. Who is closing these gates and these crossings? It's Israel. Who is the reason behind this suffocation and this killing and this famine, this starvation? It's Israel. It's not Hamas, it's not Fatah, it's not the PA, it's not the Egyptians. Already in the Egypt, there's 9,000 trucks loads are waiting. And the trucks driver are sleeping behind the trucks are waiting to get in. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can quote Professor Noura Erakat here that Palestinians are the canary in the coal mine in the situation. And I think that's why there is the kind of transnational solidarity that we have seen in the peoples that is not seen in the governments. So thank you for that. Ralph, I see you want to say something.
Yes, so to answer your question, Anisha, about please correct me if I got this wrong. You were the question was what can global South states do to put pressure on global North states to take action against Israel? Did I get that right? So actually there we do have, of course, the obligations that were clarified by the ICJ last year, right? But in some ways we still need a further clarity, right? Those obligations were obligations relating to the action of Israel, right? But what are the legal duties of states in relation to other states who are failing to discharge their duties not to support or aid or recognize the illegal behavior of Israel? And there, indeed, there is scope for states in the global South to, for example, bring cases, as Nicaragua has done, against global North states, complaining of violations of international law in the support that those states are giving to Israel. So that is actually one concrete thing, possibility that exists that would make a difference, in the sense that the nature and extent of these obligations and how they apply in practice is still very much uncertain and contested. And at the moment, Nicaragua is alone at the international court in taking such action. States could join that action. They could initiate actions of their own against Germany or against other Western states. those possibilities exist. Just as global South states participated in the advisory opinion proceedings last year and this year, and in many ways those proceedings were the arguments that went to the court in those proceedings that ended up prevailing were the arguments that came from the global South. So there is, in fact, a crucial role that states can play in clarifying the normative framework here. And as I say, there are certain areas on the subject of the responsibilities of states that remain to be clarified, and the right of states to invoke these violations on the part of other states. So the right on the question of whether a state like Nicaragua has a legal entitlement to complain on the basis of solidarity about the violations by a state like Germany of its duties in relation to the Palestinian people and the violation of their rights by Israel.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Ralph. Yes, the legal means that are available should be taken and need to be engaged with for the law to move in the direction of it to not have a situation like this again, hopefully. But I'm cognizant of the time, so I want to quickly do a round and check if any of the speakers would like to make a last remark before we close. Adnan, Amjad, any last words? Mac? All right. Michael, Ralph?
Maybe I can get in.
Please.
So one of the words that I have to say, thanks all the colleagues and friends who are doing their best in order to prepare for this convoy, diplomatic convoy, which is very important and reflect real solidarity, not only in the issue of famine, but with our legitimate rights as Palestinians who are suffering for decades of this occupation. Looking that really that you can get in Gaza, the message behind this is very important for us. We wish that we can receive you here. And in the same time, that you will manage to push these trucks to get in Gaza, this medicine, which these cancer children, these children with cancer in bad need for. Every day we are losing lives of these patients. This milk powder for the children, for the infants. Malnutrition, I could see the bodies of the children. I hope that we'll not lose more children till the opening of the crossings and we can manage to get medications for them. I hope that again and again, this issue of justice to be applied. Please continue your struggle for us and for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Adnan?
Yes, thank you. Actually, what Amjad said, motivated me, to talk a little bit about, my feelings as a Gazan and as also an UNRWA employee. I remember in 2004, I met with a delegation, Mr. Colin Powell, the latest, American Secretary of State, who was the Chief of Staff before the second invasion of Iraq. And that meeting, I remember that he looked at me and asked me, where are you coming from? I told him that I came from Gaza. And immediately in 2004, he said that Gaza is the key of stability in the Middle East. It was in 2004. At that time, Even the guys, in the delegation, they said, what is this guy talking about? About Gaza in 2004. I think that we at UNRWA, we worked hard, okay, very, very hard to connect the people of Gaza to the international, values and, even to believe in the international law. Now there's a turning point, destroying the whole or the entire population in that way, will not make peace. Even we are being asked, by hundreds and hundreds of students in our schools, why did you teach us the curriculum of human rights? We are the only body or the only state, like, not state, but your own state, that teaching human rights curriculum in the Middle East. It's UNRWA. We have, a parliament of more than 500,000 Palestinian students, and they're elected, and it's something unbelievable. And now these double standards, is being, being absorbed and understood by generations of, students in Gaza. They don't believe in that they are connected to this world. They believe that they are abandoned, that this, life killing, the famine, and and everything, and no one care. I think, people in Gaza, they need more actions, more than just, as one of my colleagues said, Mark, I think, about statements, or about the legal part of the story, or the passionate part of the story. They need, action. I believe that they have the tools. They have the tools. They can do more, and to stop, what is going on in the mind of, of these guys. It's I believe that for Palestinians, I believe that it's not allowed, for Palestinians to be part of any, terrorist group, actually. This is what I have heard from one of the, in the Gulf, ministers. I'd ask him why. He said, because very simply, that he will be becoming a leader in 2 weeks because of Palestine and Al-Aqsa and all that story. So we have to reconnect this generation in Gaza to the international civilization, to the international values, to the peace values that we tried for decades to plant it in our schools. And now we can see that everything is being destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that is a sobering note to kind of bring us to a close. Yeah, as everybody has outlined and articulated in the last hour and a half, the weaponization of starvation has been a policy that is seen for decades, but especially in the last few weeks. States have a moral, but more importantly, a legal duty to act. And it is now on us to ensure that there are enough political incentives created to move states to do what they're legally obliged to do. And the diplomatic convoy is one such approach of trying to break this absolutely inhumane but also completely illegal siege on Gaza. I would like to thank all the speakers for giving us their time and very, very valuable inputs in this conversation today. And the call for the diplomatic convoy is open. We welcome states to join. We also welcome individual members of parliaments to join. We will share the links for all of these. Please continue following the conversation around it. Please ensure that you're doing everything in your capacity to bring this atrocity to an end. Thank you.